My husband left me for a 5-year-old woman. He hit me when I didn't beg him to stay. But when he tried taking my 2 adopted sons, the judge destroyed him, and he lost everything he loved. I'm 42 years old. I work in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, and about a year and a half ago, my life exploded in the weirdest way possible. I mean, my husband of 10 years left me for a 5-year-old woman, and I say weird because I'm a man. He is too, obviously, and never in a million years would I have imagined that would happen. I guess I should start from the beginning, because the story is long and has so many twists that sometimes even I can't believe it when I think about it. Philip and I met when I was like 30 years old. He was 33 at the time. We got married 2 years later and adopted our 2 sons, Sebastian and Wesley, when they were 5 and 4 years old respectively. Everything seemed normal, you know. We had our problems like any couple, but nothing that made me think things would end the way they did. The thing is that looking back now, I can see all the signs I ignored for years. Like Philip was always kind of controlling, but I justified it by telling myself it was just his way of showing he cared. You know what I mean? Like if I came home late from work, he would call me 3 times to know where I was. Or if I went out with friends, he would text me every hour asking when I was coming back. I thought it was normal, that's how relationships were. But the truth is, it wasn't. There was also the fact that Philip had this pattern of making comments that made me feel bad, but in a super subtle way. Let's say he would tell me things like, "Oh honey, that shirt is a little tight on you," or "I don't know if you should order dessert." And in the moment I would laugh and think it was a joke, but later it would keep spinning in my head. You know? The kids also started noticing things as they grew up, especially Sebastian, who was always very perceptive. Sometimes he would ask me, "Why does Dad talk to you like that?" or "Why does Dad get so angry when you're late?" And I didn't know what to answer him because I didn't even fully understand what was happening myself. Everything changed about a year and a half ago. I think it was in March or maybe February. I'm not very sure of the exact date, but I do remember that day perfectly because it was completely surreal. I was getting ready to go to a work event. We had a dinner with important clients and I was in the bathroom putting gel in my hair when Philip came in and told me we need to talk. And I said, "Yeah, sure, but I'm running late right now. Can it wait until I get back?" And he said, "No, it has to be now." I turned around and saw him standing there with that serious expression he would put on when he was about to say something important, and he told me, "I'm leaving. I met someone and I'm moving out." I just stood there with the gel in my hands, literally not knowing what to say, because my brain wasn't processing the information correctly, like I thought it was a joke or something. And I said, "Wait, what?" And he repeated, "I met someone. Her name is Christina. She's 25 years old, and we fell in love. So, I'm going to leave the house." The weirdest thing about all of it was my reaction. I mean, in movies you always see that the person who gets left starts screaming or crying or begging them not to go, but I just stood there thinking, okay. And I felt this huge wave of relief wash over my entire body. I wasn't sad or angry or anything, just relieved. Like someone had lifted a giant weight off my shoulders that I didn't even know I was carrying. I told him that's fine. We can talk about the details when I get back from the event. And he just stared at me like waiting for me to explode or something. But I just grabbed my jacket and left. In the car on the way to the event, I realized I needed to tell someone what had just happened because it was too surreal to keep to myself. So I was going to send a message to Lawrence, a coworker who's like my best friend, to tell him and maybe make a joke about the situation because that's how I am. I use humor to deal with difficult things. I took out my 3-quote, phone at a red light and wrote, "Ha ha ha, guess what? My husband just left me for a 5-year-old woman. I literally just got dumped," and I hit send without checking who I was sending it to. 2 seconds later, I realized I had sent it to Philip instead of Lawrence, and I thought, shit. But honestly, I didn't care that much because what did it matter anymore, right? I got to the event and tried to focus on work, but my phone wouldn't stop ringing with messages from Philip asking why I was joking about something so serious and saying I wasn't taking the situation with the gravity it deserved. I didn't respond to anything during the whole dinner. I just turned off the sound on my phone and tried to do my job as best as possible, even though my mind was completely somewhere else. When I got home around 11 at night, Philip was waiting for me in the living room, with this expression of fury I had never seen on him before. And he started yelling at me about how dare I make fun of the situation, that I was being brave by telling me the truth, and that I didn't even have the decency to take it seriously. I honestly didn't understand why he was so angry, like he was the one leaving me. He was the one who had met someone else. Why did I have to be destroyed or beg him to stay? I told him, "Look, Philip, you said you were leaving, and that's fine. We can resolve everything in a civilized way for the kids," and that made him even angrier. He told me, "You know what? I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here because clearly you don't understand what you're losing, and I thought you're joking, right?" But he wasn't joking at all. The next few days were super weird. Philip was still in the house, but now he was super distant, and at the same time like obsessed with making me feel bad. Like he would let me see messages from Christina on his phone, or tell me about their plans together, just to see my reaction. And when I didn't react the way he wanted, he would get even more frustrated. One night we were arguing about how we were going to handle the situation with the kids, because obviously we needed to tell them something. Sebastian was already 12 years old, and Wesley 11. They weren't stupid, and were starting to notice something weird was going on. Philip insisted that I should be the one to tell them because, according to him, I was the one not fighting for the marriage. And I told him that was ridiculous because he was the one who wanted to leave. And the argument kept escalating until suddenly he slapped me across the face. My cheek was burning, and I could feel tears forming in my eyes, but not from the physical pain, but from the pure surprise and humiliation of what had just happened. Philip just stood there staring at me with wide eyes like he himself couldn't believe what he had done, and then he left the room without saying anything. That night I slept in the guest, the room with the door locked. And the next day when I got up, Philip was acting like nothing had happened. He asked me if I wanted coffee and talked to me about the weather like it was a completely normal day. I knew I had to do something, but I was also confused because part of me still wanted to believe this was just a bad moment and that things could go back to how they were before, which now I know was completely illogical, but at the time my brain wasn't working correctly. About 2 weeks passed in this super uncomfortable situation where we were both in the house, but basically not talking, except when absolutely necessary. And the kids were definitely noticing something was wrong. Sebastian asked me one day while I was driving him to school, "Dad, why don't you and Daddy eat together anymore?" And I didn't know what to tell him, so I just responded that we were having some disagreements, but everything was going to be okay. Which was a lie, but I didn't know how to explain the truth without destroying his world. Wesley was quieter about it, but I could see in his eyes that he was worried too. He started having trouble sleeping, and sometimes I would find him in the middle of the night standing in the hallway like he didn't know what to do. Philip's relationship with Christina started having problems like a month into all this. Turns out she didn't know he was still living with me, and when she found out, she got furious and started demanding that he move in with her immediately. Philip told me all this one night while we were drinking wine in the living room, which was super strange because we hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. And he told me that Christina was very demanding and that he was starting to doubt if he really wanted to be with her. I just listened without saying anything, because honestly I didn't know what I was supposed to respond. Was I supposed to feel sorry for him, or what? The situation with Christina went from bad to worse, apparently. She wanted Philip to propose to her even though they had only been dating for like 2 months, and when he told her he needed time, she threatened to end everything. One day I came home from work, and Philip was sitting in the living room crying with his phone in his hand. And when I asked him what was wrong, he told me that Christina had left him and that he felt lost and alone. Apparently, she had told him that if he wasn't willing to fully commit to her, then there was no point in continuing the relationship, and Philip was devastated. The craziest thing is that he came to me for comfort, like he hugged me and started saying that he had made a terrible mistake and that he wanted to fix things between us. And I just stood there, not knowing how to react because all of this was too much. I told him I needed space to think, and I went for a walk for like 2 hours trying to process everything that was happening. During those days, Philip called Sebastian in the middle of an emotional crisis, which was super inappropriate because Sebastian is a 1-2-year-old kid and shouldn't be dealing with his father's emotional problems. Sebastian told me later that Philip had told him he was very sad and didn't know what to do with his life, and my son was completely confused and scared because he had never seen his dad like that. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. One thing was for Philip to treat me badly, but involving the kids in his drama was completely unacceptable. I told him we needed to have a serious conversation about our future, and he agreed. We sat down and talked for hours about how we were going to proceed with the divorce and what was going to happen with the kids. Philip tried to convince me to give him another chance. He told me that what happened with Christina was a mistake and that he really loved me and wanted to make our marriage work. But I had already made my decision. I told him no, that what had happened between us couldn't be fixed, and that it was best to move forward with the divorce in a civilized way. He didn't take my rejection well. He got defensive and started saying that if I wasn't willing to try, then he was going to fight for full custody of the kids, because obviously I was a bad influence. I knew that was just his anger talking, but it still scared me because I didn't want to lose my children. They were literally the only thing that mattered to me at that moment. The kids kept asking what was going on, and I couldn't keep avoiding the conversation. So, one afternoon after school, I sat down with Sebastian and Wesley and explained to them in the simplest way possible that Philip and I were going to get divorced, but that didn't mean we stopped loving them. Sebastian asked a lot of questions. He wanted to know if it was his fault and where they were going to live and if they were still going to see both dads. And I tried to answer everything as best I could, even though there were things I didn't know myself yet. Wesley. I didn't say anything during the whole conversation. He just sat there with tears falling down his cheeks, and that image still breaks my heart when I remember it. Philip started acting more and more erratic. There were days when he acted like everything was normal, and other days when he wouldn't even talk to me. And worst of all, he started neglecting his responsibilities with the kids. There was one time he was supposed to pick up Sebastian and Wesley from school, but he never showed up. I was in an important meeting at work when the school called me saying the kids were still there waiting, and that nobody had come for them. I ran out of the office and drove like crazy to the school where I found my two sons sitting in the principal's office looking completely lost and scared. When we got home, Philip was there like nothing had happened. And when I asked him why he hadn't picked up the kids, he told me he forgot. Just like that, he forgot. That's when I decided I needed to get the kids out of that house and find my own place. I couldn't keep exposing Sebastian and Wesley to this toxic environment where their father acted so unpredictably. I started looking for apartments and found a nice 3-bedroom one that was close to the kids' school. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was enough for the 3 of us. When I told Philip I was moving out with the kids, he got furious and threatened to sue me for kidnapping if I took them. But I had already talked to a lawyer who explained that I could move without a problem as long as I didn't leave the state and as long as I gave Philip access to the kids. The move was on a rainy Saturday. I remember that day perfectly because Sebastian and Wesley helped me pack their things, and there was this mix of sadness and excitement in the air. Like they were sad to leave the house where they had grown up, but also excited to have a new beginning. Philip wasn't present during the move. He said he couldn't bear to see us go, so he went to a friend's house for the day. Our new apartment was small compared to the house, but we made it feel like home quickly. The kids chose their rooms, and I let them paint the walls whatever color they wanted. Sebastian chose dark blue, and Wesley chose green. Things were relatively calm for about a month after the move. Philip would come pick up the kids on weekends, and although the interaction between us was tense, at least it was civilized. But then Philip decided he wanted to get back together with Christina, and apparently she agreed to give him another chance. And without consulting me or preparing them mentally, Philip brought Christina to meet Sebastian and Wesley during one of his weekends. The kids came back Sunday night, super confused and uncomfortable. Sebastian told me they had spent the whole weekend with this woman they didn't know, and that Dad was acting super weird with her, like very lovey-dovey and different from how he normally was. That was the beginning of a series of terrible decisions by Philip. He started prioritizing his relationship with Christina over his responsibilities as a father. He would cancel his weekends with the kids because Christina wanted to do other things, or he would take them with them to places where the kids clearly didn't want to be. Wesley started saying he didn't want to go with Dad on weekends, and that broke my heart because I never wanted the kids to have to choose between their parents. But I also couldn't force them to go if they really didn't want to. Philip realized he was losing his children, and instead of reflecting on his behavior and changing it, he decided to blame me. I received a letter from his lawyer saying that Philip was going to fight for full custody of Sebastian and Wesley because I was unstable and was alienating the kids against him, which was completely ridiculous because I had never said anything bad about their father to them, despite everything that had happened. The letter also mentioned the incident where I had made the joke about being dumped, saying that demonstrated I didn't take our marriage seriously and therefore wasn't fit to be the primary custodian of the children. I felt completely overwhelmed because I knew a legal battle was going to be expensive and stressful, and because I was afraid of actually losing my children, even though rationally I knew there was no way that would happen. I hired a lawyer who was incredible. Her name was Margaret, and she was like 55 years old and had handled hundreds of custody cases. She assured me that based on the facts, I had a very strong position. We started collecting evidence of everything that had happened. The messages where Philip canceled his weekends with the kids, the incident where he didn't pick them up from school, testimonies from teachers who had noticed the kids were happier and more stable since they were living with me. Margaret also prepared me for testimony, explaining what kind of questions Philip's lawyer I would ask me and how I should answer them without getting emotional or defensive. The day of the custody hearing was one of the most stressful days of my life. I arrived at court early in the morning and saw Philip there with his lawyer and with Christina, which seemed super inappropriate to me. But his lawyer apparently thought it would be a good idea to show that Philip had a new stable partner. The hearing lasted like 4 hours. Philip's lawyer tried to paint me as someone who hadn't taken the divorce seriously and who was more concerned with making jokes than with the kids' well-being. But Margaret counterattacked with all the evidence we had collected, showing a consistent pattern of negligence and erratic behavior by Philip. They also called Sebastian to testify, which was horrible because my 2-year-old son had to sit on that stand and answer questions about which of his parents he preferred to live with. The judge was very gentle with him, but it was still a traumatic experience for everyone. The judge took about a week to give his decision, and it was the longest 7 days of my life. I basically couldn't concentrate on anything else and barely slept thinking about all the possible scenarios. When I finally got the call from Margaret saying we had won, I literally started crying with relief, right there in my office. I didn't care that my coworkers saw me. The judge granted me primary custody of Sebastian and Wesley, with supervised visits for Philip, until he could demonstrate he could maintain a stable and responsible relationship with the kids. Plus, Philip had to attend therapy and parenting classes before the visits could go back to being unsupervised. I think that was the best thing that could have happened, because it gave Philip the push he needed to really work on his problems, instead of just blaming everyone else for his mistakes. Philip started taking therapy seriously, and little by little things improved. The supervised visits became unsupervised after about 6 months, and although our relationship will never go back to what it was now, at least we can communicate respectfully about the kids. Christina. And he ended up breaking up for good like 3 months after the hearing. Apparently she didn't want to be with someone who had so many unresolved issues, and honestly, I don't blame her. Philip sent me a long letter like 2 months ago, apologizing for everything he had done and acknowledging that his behavior during the divorce was inexcusable. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive him completely, but I appreciate that at least he's capable of admitting his mistakes now. Sebastian and Wesley are doing well now. We've been living in the apartment for almost a year, and they've completely adapted to our new normal. Sebastian is in 7th grade and doing really well. He even joined the school soccer team, which makes me super happy because before he was very shy and didn't participate in extracurricular activities. Wesley still has his difficult moments. Sometimes he gets sad when he thinks about how things used to be before, but overall he's much better than a year ago. I'm better too. The truth is, I never realized how unhappy I was in my marriage until I got out of it, and although the process was horrible and traumatic for everyone, now I can see it was necessary. I don't regret anything because everything that happened brought me to where I am now, which is a much healthier and happier place for me and for my children. And at the end of the day, that's the only thing that really matters.